Welcome. So what do you need to know to be able to solve a perfect square trinomial? And again, when solving a perfect square trinomial, let's just go with the standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, so when we have a quadratic and we want to be able to solve a perfect square trinomial, what is it we need to know? Well, there's a couple things I would say. First of all, we want to be able to make sure that we can solve a quadratic by factoring, right? And that doesn't matter if a is equal to 1 or a is a number that's larger than or that's not 1. We want to make sure we know how to factor. And because that's going to become very important, because even if you have a perfect square trinomial, you can always apply the factoring techniques. And that's very helpful because a perfect square trinomial is going to allow us to be able to factor a little bit quicker. But you can always go back to your basics of factoring. So when applying perfect square trinomial, how are we going to identify? And that's what I would probably say is the most important thing for us to know. When we're looking into identifying a perfect square trinomial, we're looking into identifying the a and the c as perfect squares. And I'll just give you an example of some integers that are perfect squares, because obviously these can take shape as far as fractions, and so forth. But we want to pretty much be looking for these numbers because these are what we call square numbers, where you can take the square root of them and have an integer. So the most common square numbers you'll probably be using in this course would be 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144, 169, 189, and 225. 16 times 16, I believe, is 242, and then 289 would be 17 times 17. But I wouldn't probably say we're going to go. This is 2 all the way through. Actually, in 1 we'll use a lot as well. And then up to 15 squared, which would be 225. So, what you're going to need to know to be able to do this is making sure, one, that you can identify the perfect square trinomials. And then also, when we go into the factoring technique and you're identifying, hey, a is a square number and c is a square number, when I get into this factored form, making sure that we identify, and I'm just going to use some variables, nx plus q times mx plus p, okay? Make sure that we know that these are going to be the same, actually. Okay? Make sure that these variables, when we're factoring a perfect square trinomial, these are the same. And n times n equals a, or n squared equals a, and q times q is going to equal c, or q squared equals c. So it's very important that these coefficients or constants, when we write them in the factored form, are going to multiply to give us our a and our c. And then the other thing that's also important is when we have two binomials multiplied from a perfect square, that we can combine them as a binomial squared, and that will help us solve our problem by using the square root method. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's just kind of a little basics on what we're going to get into for this course and what really you need to know walking into it. Thanks so much.